We use maps every day, whether it be to find out what is the fastest route to get to work or to choose which destination to go to next for vacation. But even if we have satellites and all the latest technology, we somehow cannot come up with the perfect map. Even Google acknowledges that there is no end to the quest for the perfect map. What started this search in figuring out the topography of our world, and how has it changed over the years? Welcome to Intrigued Mind, and join us in mapping out the history of maps and how it has changed our view of the world. The first known sketch of a world map can be traced back to around 700 BCE to the Babylonian clay tablet known as the Imago Mundi, which is currently displayed in the British Museum in London. It consists of two concentric rings and varying geometric symbols. The center depicts the city of Babylon, and next to it are neighboring civilizations like Assyria and Elam. Surrounding this concentric circle is the Salt Sea. This shows that our ancestors used symbols to depict the landscape, such as urban areas, surrounding water bodies, and even mountains. But this would become more profound of use in other ancient maps. This can be seen most clearly in the map of Claudius Ptolemy in 150 BC. Ptolemy was a Greek scholar who provided a list of locations of Mediterranean trade. Ptolemy's world stretched 180 degrees from the Canary Islands to Korea. The way he depicted the world was of great significance because Ptolemy was the first one to use mathematics and geometry to develop a way to do cartography, even though his calculations were inaccurate. He even depicted the 7 climate zones by using latitude and longitude lines, which is still used in modern maps today. Although aspects of Ptolemy's depiction were accurate, such as the course of the Nile River, there were others that were solely hypotheses, such as the land bridge that connected Africa and Asia. Of particularly interesting note is his depiction of a large river system under what is now the Sahara Desert. But that is a topic for another video. Ptolemy wrote his manuscript, Geography, in Alexandria, Egypt. However, it was largely lost after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It was not until 1,000 years later, where it would have been discovered and distributed widely across Europe, that served as inspiration for many other cartographers. But aside from scholarly use, many of the ancient maps became of great use, especially for travel, warfare, and trade. One example is the Tabula Rogeriana, which not only showed the distances between countries, but could be used by common Roman travelers. It was called the itinerarium, which is what they called the ancient Roman road map. This was created during Emperor Augustus's reign, and it was surprisingly thought to be created by his best friend, General Agrippa. This map was later engraved on marble in 12 BCE. Besides showing the entire Roman map at the time in detail, it stretched to the Ganges River and even showed a hint of China. This map also showed a distortion, since they made the Roman area bigger than other parts of the world. This discrepancy in representing landmasses is also seen in many other maps, even until today. But that will be discussed later in the video. There were other maps during this time that were of significance, but could not really be described due to their lack of detail. But speaking of details, one of the most detailed maps of history, which was inspired by early ancient works, such as Ptolemy's map, was made by the foremost Arabian cartographer, Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Idrisi. He was commissioned by the Norman King Roger II of Sicily to map the world in the year 1154, and this would be one map that would be in use for 300 years. Why was it in use for so long? Aside from the fact that his map spanned from Africa to Scandinavia, he drew his map, the Tabula Rogeriana, in the 7 climate zones, like Ptolemy, but he took it one step further by dividing each zone into 10 sections, creating 70 segments with text in each segment. He wrote not only descriptions of the land, but also described the indigenous people there. He drew on his experiences with Greek, Christian, and Islamic traditions, and this brought about one of the most detailed maps of the 12th century. Even so, the map itself is hardly geographically accurate. It is important to note that during this evolving cartography from the Eastern world, there was also progress in the Western world, but they differed in ways they configured their maps. In the east, they were drawn with the north oriented to the top, much like our maps today. This is especially seen in 550 CE when Cosmas Indicopleustes, a traveler and monk, challenged the ideas of Ptolemy that the earth was a sphere. He created a map with north located at the top. He continued to stick with the idea that the world was in a tabernacle, so to him, the world was as flat as can be. But of course, that has long been debunked. In contrast, the Western maps were designed with a different configuration. The typical medieval cartography, which is known as TO maps, shows Jerusalem at center, Asia toward the top, Europe at the bottom left, and Africa on the bottom right, creating the T shape. It was all about the orientation of the individuals who made them, where they were located, and what their beliefs of the nature of the world were. This TO configuration is seen in maps known as the Mapamundi, which is Latin for maps of the world, or basically the term pertaining to any map of the medieval period. These maps were guided primarily by theology rather than geography. Examples of these maps are the Hereford and the abstract Mapamundi, which used symbolic images that historians say are likely to be used for devotional purposes. Together with its location, biblical stories such as Noah's Ark, the temptation of Adam and Eve, and even the resurrection of Christ were depicted across the map, regardless if the event really happened there. Though, not all of the Mapamundi's details are based heavily on religion. The Anglo-Saxon Mapamundi is one of the few that focused its design more on its geography, more specifically on England's insular regions. However, it did manage to keep the TO configuration. This way of designing maps would end by the late 14th century, and there would be the rediscovery of Ptolemy's work in the West, which would explain the subsequent shift in the practice of cartography. In 1502, the Cantino planisphere was created by an unknown Portuguese mapmaker, and has an unknown provenance as well. It was named after Alberto Cantino, who was an Italian undercover spy, but there is no record as to how he acquired it. What is notable about this map is that it is the first map to include the Arctic Circle, the equator, the tropics, and even the border between Portugal and Spain. It even depicted the first image of Florida's lower coastline, the first hint at the Americas. But this was not given much attention to until Waldseemüller's Universalis Cosmographia in 1507. It is the work of a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller and considered the most expensive map in the world. Why? Because it is the first map to include the Pacific Ocean and show the separate continent of America, which Waldseemüller named in honor of the Amerigo Vespucci, who was the first to believe a new continent had been discovered. A quick cool fact about this map is that Vespucci and Ptolemy appear at the top of the map, and it is known as America's birth certificate. However, Waldseemüller never used the name America again on any other series of maps as he had reservations about naming a continent. If only he knew now that it stuck. When the first circumnavigation around the globe was made by Ferdinand Magellan's expedition in 1522, the Portuguese cartographer Diogo Ribeiro got to work. Ribeiro, commissioned by the Spanish king, composed a map during the dispute between Spain and Portugal over the Moluccas, one of the Spice Islands. What is notable here is that in the map, he placed the Spice Islands just inside the Spanish half of the world, even though they actually belong to Portugal. Just another example of how politics can manipulate geography. In addition, Spain was the one paying him. A few years later, one of the most influential figures in the history of mapmaking would arise. Flemish-German cartographer Gerardus Mercator attempted to project a spherical world onto a flat surface, which would become the preferred method of mapping for centuries. Also known as the Mercator Projection, this would represent a breakthrough in nautical cartography, one that would become especially useful with advanced technology of the mid-18th century. Mercator had quite a colorful history. He had been imprisoned by Catholic authorities for heresy and has been accused of Eurocentrism since the territory places Europe at the top of the map, and there is distortion in the land size. But no map is perfect. But by the late 17th century, Mercator's projection was somewhat forgotten, and there was a regression to the conventional method of showing Earth as two hemispheres instead of spreading it on a flat map. This was done by the Blaus, where they used their trade experience to produce a vast atlas. The Blaus would be the leading printers and map makers in the Netherlands, but what made them different from other cartographers was their focus on a commercial audience and showing their customers what they wanted to see. Their business spanned almost a century, and they produced hundreds of maps that showed the Earth, the seas, and even the heavens. It even depicted California as an island. By the 19th century, there was another turn, and cartographers reverted back to the use of Mercator's projection. But it was noted to skew sizes of the land. For example, Australia is more than 3 times larger than Greenland, but Greenland appears much larger on the map. Many of the maps today, though are not static, they can be appreciated through a variety of projections and scales, depending on what use you need it for, be it for maritime use, geography class, vacationing at a park, or even everyday use to get to a store. We have the cutting-edge technology of satellites that allow us to zoom out and see the outline of country we live in and zoom in on our neighborhood street. World maps may have changed throughout the centuries, but there is no such thing as a completely accurate, unbiased map of the world, even today. But that is because we are only human. Maps are designed by humans, as are the people who built the technology and the people who started mapmaking. Humans are shaped by different experiences, cultures, religions, and it pours out into whatever work is done, maps included. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.